Thanks guys for having me and giving me a platform. I will share my screen. Let's look at that and get started. So I've decided to talk about the architecture for the new China because Zardid architects and I guess many other architects in the Western Hemisphere totally rely on China to do work, to express their ideas on a significant scale, and actually to still exist. I mean, our turnover or work is over 80% Chinese these days. So, and it's been a fantastic ride for us. Zardid architects and China grew together in the last 25 years. We were booming together. Both China and ZHA kind of had a tenfold, let's say, increase in economic power. So, so I will dedicate this lecture to China. And so, of course, one of the highlights has been that we managed to build the new, design and build the new dashing Beijing airport. In its final state will be the biggest airport in the world, and it's also the biggest walkable single walkable terminal space, which huge kind of free spanning space with the most aircraft accessible directly through walking, and that makes it very rapid and fast between transfer, for instance. And in the center, you see a major skylight for an orientation space. You see a series of these blob forms, oval forms, which are actually columns, which at the same time skylights. And then you see this kind of cuts out to the gates. And at the end of the gates, there's also actually gardens, outdoor gardens. So the whole thing is conceived and as a very clear structure navigation space. In the front, you have the car park and the train cutting in right on center. Actually, what's beautiful about this axis is at the same time the axis of the Forbidden City in Beijing up north, and then the axis continues up to the Olympic Stadium and Olympic complex. So it's a very monumental setup all the way between our airport and the Olympic Stadium, cutting right through the Forbidden City. So, and we've done this amazing structure with a series of very large columns with at the same time skylights, and that's all there is in terms of columns. And then picking up at the edge again, as you can see, that these columns bring light down across the levels. Bottom left, you see a kind of domestic arrival point, for instance. And we have this amazing central space, which is actually, you can walk up to it right from the outside. So the land side is coming in and overlooking that main space. So you get an enormous amount of transparency and public access to this building. These buildings become not destinations in their own right, kind of urban subcenter now in the south of Beijing. So just a few more views. That's the way you approach by car. Okay, so we recently also completed the new Changsha cultural complex. It's again a kind of hub for a whole new urban subcenter in Changsha, and they create an artificial lake and then place this opera and museum complex on the lake to kind of kick off that whole district, which is then surrounded by larger buildings. And that's something we recently completed as well, with a major lobby space, multi-level lobby, and it's unbelievable main auditorium space, which we're very proud of. And that's the museum, which has an atrium again, which organizes a series of galleries around that. And there's a complex with 3 buildings and a lot of landscape. This idea of integrating multiple buildings into a unified complex becomes through here. But I want to go through a little bit the history. We kicked off with projects like the Hong Kong Innovation Tower, It's a very special tower, and I will talk about towers a lot, making towers more urban objects. So you can see here there's a lot of interesting things happening on the ground surface with ramps and undercrofts. You can actually move right through under the tower, as well as terraces connecting up, a series of cut terraces to step out, as well as 3 atria on the inside. So these are some of the balconies and terraces you saw here. One of the flagships is a Galaxy Beijing. So it's a new kind of urban project, multiple buildings connected with bridges. Each building has an atrium. So the theme of atria and bridges is very important to create buildings which connect up and are internally hollowed out for the sake of intervisibility and inter-awareness of the various players. But there's also a kind of outdoor urban atrium, if you like, a very activated multi-level urban zone in the center between those 4 buildings. You can see here the way it sits in the urban fabric, and what kind of canyon and multi-level, exterior urban spaces it belongs. It's really a kind of Fritz Lang's Metropolis, the movie and vision of a new city become reality 100 years later. So these are the kind of multi-level urban activations, and then moving on the inside. Each of these has their own kind of atrium, but again, you can see here the way these atria connect up into a system, into a network through bridges, and major event spaces on the interior as well. So these are, there are thousands of small companies, so it's a kind of entrepreneurial culture China is. That's a turbo capitalism, has very little to do with communism at this stage. And so these kind of commercial venues become actually also cultural venues and venues of public communication. So there's one of those privately owned public spaces I've been promoting and talking about, because we believe that private entrepreneurship is very important in the urban realm, urban entrepreneurs. So with the same client, we've done a number of projects. This is a project in Shanghai where we did the same game of atria and in-between spaces and bridges, kind of layered multi-level urbanism as well. So we're also connecting up with big towers, but then there's always important what happens on the ground. There's a kind of complex 3-dimensional courtyard, big multi-level lobby spaces and the big conference center connecting up. This is in Nanjing. Or I also consider Macau and Hong Kong are now part of China, a hotel, but it's also activated through a major atrium and a series of bridges. So for me, the atrium is not only an internal connector, but also a connector visually with the urban surroundings. So this is made possible through the exoskeleton, that you have an internal, fantastic, vertiginous, hollowed out atrium space, which you can see here moving up. And you see through layers, you see some of the bridges, you see through them all the way up to the tower. And you get these panoramic elevators, you get these bridge-like spaces. There's a number of event spaces, restaurants, breakfast spaces, etc., gallery spaces suspended in that void. And you navigate it with a panoramic elevator. And at the top, you have a beautiful pool, in fact, which I'm not going to show you this time. So this is always the window also connecting to the outside. So this theme of big open atriums, bridges, etc., is going to be the theme. Now, Lisa Tower is one of those, the same client, SOHO China, which means small home office. Again, it's hundreds, perhaps thousands of small startup companies coming in. Originally, there was even the allowance for residences and shops to be in this concept. That has normalized a little bit in recent years. But you can see again, big atrium, the tallest atrium in the world, but also big window into the urban. So you can see right through the building and you can sense what's going on. Bridges connecting the two sides as well. So that space is, is an amazing sensation. And this building is actually connecting directly with Dashing Airport. So this is also the urban check-in, intersection of three railway lines. That's why we also cut the tower, because the railway line cuts right through the center of the tower underneath, as well as a kind of retail sunken podium and connecting down to the hub. So it's a kind of TOD hub building with beautifully constructed. You can see the bridges, you see the transparency or into the void. You can see how you can occupy that void with events and activation and experiences. So you in night view looking up, and these twists allow, first of all, there's an urban connection with the railway, and high up it twists into alignment with the street space, but it also tilts beautifully the surfaces into view. So when you look down or you look up, there is things tilting into view. So it makes for more interest, but also for more intervisibility, meaning inter-awareness. Then we have this kind of beautiful facade, which gradually from flattened sheets become these kind of shingle and ever deeper shingles, which become very interesting from different perspectives. So it's highly sensitive to orientation and the play of light. And in that gap, you actually can have mechanical, so you can open kind of direct ventilation in these pieces. So I think it's beautiful. And the idea was developed. I developed actually at Harvard when I was teaching. I was always a fan of John Portman, who's the inventor of the big atrium, and he was doing it only for hotels. And I thought it would be fantastic for work environments, for corporate headquarters or incubator space, etc. So this was the first mega atrium sketch we did. Very visionary and big for a huge Hyundai tower. In the end they wanted height rather than sensation. Shame on them. But anyway, so this was the first kind of sketch of this mega atrium space. So it's an interior urbanism. It's a city district in a single building. And then, as you see, when we make these big windows, we can connect up between multiple of these buildings and have bridges within and bridges across buildings. That's the kind of vision, and we got one of those underway in Wuhan for a conglomerate called Taikang. So this is the idea of the conglomerate has many companies which could sit together and have, again, this networking connections, as well the urbanization of the building. So this is the theme we've been pushing. We would like to do this all over the world, but so far China is the place where we can do that. And so we recently won the competition, and we're already completing SD for now for Oppo. It's another telecom corporation, a giant corporation, and Shenzhen is the ultimate technology hub of this globe. I mean, a city which is, only young people, only a lot of energy and entrepreneurship, and the tech sector is incredibly powerful. So that's where we put up this building. And again, it is a series of towers connected with bridges and atria for internal connections. So this theme kind of goes through. The buildings become ever more complex, fascinating, and the cores are taken to the side and pulled away. We also can show you that we just won a major bank tower in Hong Kong, where we also pulled the core back and opening up a whole undercroft and making fantastic open floor plates and terraces. So Shenzhen, Hong Kong, Shanghai, we're doing these kind of projects. And you can see the idea of these open intervisibility, fluid, agile working environments, and sensing and seeing what's going on around you is critical in that era of what I call the post-photo network society, where everybody becomes creative, everybody becomes innovative. That means whatever you do has to be connected up with many other disciplines, with any other aspects of launching a new product, a new service, a new piece of software. There's so many aspects: finance, marketing, R&D, coding, technology, interface design. So the networking is incredibly important for that, where you can't be told what to do, because it's a continuous recalibrating what you do with respect to what everybody else is doing. So these let's say, atrium and bridge projects become, I think, the right way, and a sense of being part of a hub. You bring thousands of people together, not to hide them from each other in cells and different, let's say, segregated floors, but to make them connect up, to share knowledge, to cooperate, collaborate, and be intervisible also through the facade. So when you look out of the building, you look back at the building oftentimes, and I think that's fascinating. So then we kind of start cutting away floors, always looking for connections across floors, and developing at the moment the facade and the details of this project. So I think that's, and then that's a kind of a high density cluster of those kind of tech companies in Shenzhen. And then of course, ample opportunities for social spaces. Top of tower is always a major theme. We never put the plant on top. We always leave the top for social spaces, as well as the undercroft and lower part of the building, which I'm not showing you in detail here, but there's an enormous amount of interested layered ground conditions in this project. So we have multiple tops of tower where you can also, with the various hubs, can look at each other and participate in what is the life of such a corporation, which is incredibly complex, incredibly, these are prosperity engines. And so we've done, this one is actually an interesting one. It's offices, headquarters of the Xi'an Foundation. Xi'an is one of the founder of Tencent, and there is a lot of, it's an academy with a lot of seminar spaces, libraries, and the ground floor is incredibly open, a deep space, and then you pull away with off the normal office, and at the top there's again special office spaces. And you can see, I'm not sure if some of you are aware of the project by Moholy Notch from the 1920s, the Skyhook, some borrowings there for these kind of cantilevering special spaces on the top. But first looking at this kind of layeredness, a lot of green and spill out spaces, outdoor spaces. You can step out on many levels in the cascading podium, but also at the top level, there's a number of outdoor terraces as well. So you can see the plaza, the multi-leveled ground condition, big kind of open spaces for libraries and so on, bridges through atriums. Our usual themes, and at the top, we have a number of cantileverings, deepest, bigger spaces, double height spaces, exterior spaces, etc. So this is something fascinating. There's something similar. We just won the competition for a major energy corporation. This is Shanghai, now not Shenzhen. And again, we at the top of tower, you can see where we create depth and we create void spaces and outdoor spaces. And again, not only towers, we also do a kind of medium height buildings. This is the headquarters for a Chinese company called Infinitus. They're doing a lot of sophisticated, let's say, health products and nutritional foods and so on. And so again, the theme is here to have multiple buildings, ample space for socializing on the roof, bridges with multiple levels as well as the roof level for the bridging, and under construction here already, and big atria spaces as well. So the atriums have bridges, the buildings have bridges, and these are occupied sometimes double height, you know, for maybe for gyms and other social events. So the office space is not going to be kind of heads down. It's more kind of interaction space, meeting, collaborating, gathering in teamworks, which are very kind of self-directed and fluid. So you need to be aware what's going on and whether you want to participate. These tech companies and innovative companies allow a lot of scope for, let's say, self-organization. So that is, you create the platforms for these kind of things. Now, the next thing I wanted to show is China urbanization in a city like Shanghai, which is a fantastic historical quarters of the Bund. This is a little bit further down on the river, a big site, second layer from the river. And you can see here there's a lot of heritage buildings, which we're going to renovate, and a lot of garden space, a kind of very kind of dense pedestrianized fabric. And then out of this, we're pulling towers to activate that ground. So then the people living in the towers can kind of come down and urbanize the whole site. And at the top of tower, we have again this kind of play of terraces and very lush and let's say luxurious places to live as well, because we have to. So this is the way that these kind of two big sites. We have densely kind of programmed them, but there's, let's say, many heritage buildings which we have renovated, a lot of gardens, courtyards, and some new structures which are ground based and terrace, like terrace houses, or rather townhouses, and then a series of towers pulling out of that. And very interesting the way the towers land. So the first kind of 5-6 levels is just structure, and we have open lobbies or hovering over existing buildings and things like that. We're also renovating some of the existing into event spaces, galleries, retail spaces, bars and restaurants and so on. So we're going to be pedestrian nice conditions, sunken courtyards. You can see some of the heritage buildings, and the tower is always pulling up to have kind of multi-level, let's say, ground scapes, and actually literally pedestrian street pervading, so the general public can move through in these kind of shopping streets, and then the towers kind of launching and hovering on top. And then higher up, they start kind of becoming more, double height maisonettes with big terraces. And that will be spend the time. Again, you can see here the way these existing buildings have been reappropriated. And I mean, they simply penetrate over it with the towers. And looking up, I mean, this is aspirational. I mean, China is the new America. American dream is kind of, still exists maybe in some pockets of California and New York, but in China it's everywhere. It's a kind of Chinese dream of entrepreneurship, of participating in an economy which is still growing at 6-7%. If you have great ideas, if you have entrepreneurship, you're bringing ideas from abroad, you can make a lot of people happy, and you can generate a lot of prosperity, and then you can also become yourself very kind of well off, and that's a great aspiration. So we have in China, you'll see a lot of these, and I fully stand behind that. Entrepreneurs who do incredibly well, and these are the hundreds and thousands of them, the whole towers of them. I mean, it's unheard of. And that's why we don't make one penthouse. We have nearly the top third of the tower being these amazing penthouses, because the centers like financial center like Shanghai, or technology centers like Shenzhen, they generate prosperity around the globe, and we all living of benefiting from this, and we all give our little share back to those movers and shakers who then should enjoy the fruits of their labor on the fantastic penthouse up there. So that's my pitch, and it's amazing to be up there. And this is very central. It's a dense, it's Shanghai. You can overlook, you can see the river, you see back at the fantastic sky of Shanghai from these kind of places. So I mean, it's something we enjoy doing. Is these are dream houses, but in a high dense urban environment. But we also do is, of course, public buildings, where a part of the prosperity engine, exhibition center, the new Beijing exhibition center, we just won that competition for its new extension, and you can see big halls, but also public activation, bridges, etc. But we also do, we're doing very low cost. This is modular student housing for Hong Kong University. So generating prefabricated modular units and creating courtyards and roof terraces and trying to urbanize and activate university campus as well. So as well as, for instance, sketches for a cyberport, so-called Hong Kong, they're starting in Hong Kong, they're starting now to kind of, like everywhere around the world, harbor spaces, waterfront spaces in the city, getting converted into more this kind of knowledge economy as well. And we're doing another one. We just won a competition for this is also kind of a port, Shenzhen port in this case, on the border of Hong Kong. Again, a knowledge hub, knowledge economy, industry hub for robotics companies and such, as well as big kind of cultural elements as well integrated, as well as urban spines connecting up with the tower cluster. So these are these kind of new urban developments, and they come in large sizes. So there's 1 million square meter right there, and that's at that scale. China is expanding, and this is another 1 million square meter. And this is for Tencent. It's a technology campus for Tencent in Xi'an. So this is most of the technology buildings, a central plaza, a central access spine, a lot of retail on the waterfront here, and then residences. All of these residences connected up. These are little urban districts which are launched and will then urbanize and create kind of tech clusters around them. So that is what we've generated. We have, you can see it's a kind of mid-rise, multi-level, very open with a lot of outdoor terraces, roof gardens, bridges, to have that horizontal network of spaces. And that's what is underway at the moment in Xi'an. And you can see here again a lot of transparency, a lot of terracing, et cetera, et cetera. They're also very interested in working with drones. So they believe in drone deliveries, but also drone travel. And again, so Tencent is a major, super innovative technology company. You know, most of you know that. And so this is in Shenzhen. They're doing their main campus now on the bay. It's again harbor area. This was harbor. This is still harbor. This will later on mirror it over. So the whole peninsula will be Tencent Technology Campus. And this is so dense that we're also building up towers. We're building up public buildings. I mean, cultural buildings, waterfront conditions, residential quarters. I mean, these are real cities nearly, and under the kind of branding or leadership of Tencent, but they of course will invite many other companies who will kind of nest in such a structure, and that's what is happening in Shenzhen at the moment. So we have a few more. These city centers, it's difficult to do these kind of larger clusters. So it's edge of city or new districts, but then they come in with the idea of garden city, but also a lot of density. So this is our so-called Chengdu unicorn. Chengdu is the capital of Sichuan province, one of the largest cities in China. And so this is a startup incubator cluster, partly governments, partly private, and it has residences as well as many office spaces. And the whole traffic is covered by a big plate. So it's a garden pedestrian space, some traffic and deliveries from underneath, and then beautiful waterfront conditions all around. So the idea of a tech campus, university campus, but more urban, more dense. So this is our scheme, and we want to commission. You can see here that the big traffic comes in and pulls out, and then you have all that pedestrianized connection. You see the buildings, most of them have atria, connected on multiple levels. This is the first building. We've already finished construction, and we're moving on to several other buildings at the moment. So this is the way it appears across the river. It is pulling up in the residences quite high, and the office buildings are kind of 7, 8, 9 stories. And it is kind of very much based on terraces as well. So outdoor spaces all around between the buildings, on the buildings, so we have a lot of these terracing. And we're trying to vary the theme of these kind of donut style buildings with hotels, with residences as well. And a lot of kind of intensified 3D park, if you like. So it's quite dense and intense, but feels quite green and because the traffic is not interfering, you don't get the noise, you don't get the pollution, and you get actually quite lovely, a lot of outdoor spaces for that. So this is the first building we've created. It's an exhibition center with the courtyard and a sunken big exhibition space, and a series of terraces as well. So this was super fast track. I mean, it's also the speed is very impressive in China, and it's stressful, but it's more satisfying to get something within 1 or 2 or 3 years than having to wait kind of 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 years. So this is a beautiful steel structure, open hall with multiple levels, and this kind of skylight coming in, and you can also step out into a courtyard in the building. So that has been just completed in Chengdu. And you can see we're always playing with levels so that you can drive, and kind of at the lower level you can walk up the building. At the higher level there's the interspersing of green, a lot of spill out areas. So this kind of idea of edge of city activation into new knowledge economy hubs is happening all over the China. So this was Chengdu. This is the north of China, Qinghandao, and this is all an old port area which was totally sealed off, and now becomes the kind of the waterfront, obviously fantastic activator. You can create these kind of buildings in the round, looking at each other through a water body and connecting up with the promenade, series of cultural buildings. There's still some connection with cruise liners, and then a series of kind of mid-rise urban fabric with a lot of parks interspersed. So this is Garden City, but tech Garden City, not kind of sleeping Garden City. And so we're developing this kind of very interesting terrace and fragmented fabric, a lot of courtyards and step backs and setbacks for terraces, porosity, and a lot of green and pedestrian passages as well as streets. So, and you can see here some of the fabrics we developed for that, which is this kind of clustering of nearly containers, like small for co-living zones with courtyards. And you can see these buildings, even the residents have a lot of shared spaces. This is co-living, co-working, which we're proposing in this. And a lot of course then marina. So you get kind of knowledge economy interlaced with nearly holiday resort to some extent. That's where you can have great conferences and have you know, great life. That is a bit the kind of California model brought to the Chinese kind of tech sector. So another one we've just this one we doing in Qingtai. This is a new city or below Beijing, in the kind of triangle Beijing with Tianjin and Hebei. And so this is actually a big water body. Again, the idea to create through a water body, like in Changsha, you generate a skyline, an intervisibility, like a big plaza. And then we have actually lined up towers. There's a big railway station, high speed coming in on axis, and then building around it in concentric circles and becoming quite low. So there's a lot of also residences and smaller buildings, mixed use fabrics, Garden City. Again, it's Xi Jinping. And so there's a move away, and I'm not showing, we had Wuhan, a super high density tower city extension. No, they want something mid-rise. They want oftentimes now, you know, this kind of idea of a pedestrianized city, let's say low rise, high density, Garden City. And we're pushing on the density side, perhaps more than what would be typically, but we believe that that's the way forward. So you can see here the way the fabric is medium. It starts from let's say 3 stories, 2-3 stories into 4, 5, 6 stories, and then builds up around the water to much higher levels, and it's kind of cascading geometry. So in the central axis, you get a relatively high buildup, a layered buildup onto the waterfront. And so these themes, they're all the cities now competing with setting up these tech districts, let's say. And I mean, that's what I call the architecture for the new China. China is transitioning from the manufacturing hothouse of the world, where everything literally is manufactured, into a knowledge economy, creative network and knowledge economy, where they want to, bring in a lot of, AI research, robotics research, biomedical research. They want to transition into the R&D sectors, and not only manufacturing, where the R&D is happening in the US and they're just manufacturing. No, they're building their own brands and their own research institutions and so on. And again, this is where they go. They go to the edge of the city. I mean, it looks like a few countryside, but off the frame, there is already, let's say, highly built up outskirts. This is Chongqing, another major city in China, another 20 million city, where we developed this kind of high intensity activation of this valley. This is again a valley, but artificially filled with water, with a dam to generate the waterfront. And then in this hilly landscape, we generate the kind of topography style fabric, trying to push down. A lot of this is underground as well. And you can see how we're trying to embed buildings. So with sunken courtyards, the buildings not higher than the tree canopies, so to not build up towers at the plateau, and to have this kind of very organic deep floor plans as well for labs and for tech. Traffic-wise, there is a big road system on the outside, but then there's a lot of pedestrian passages, cable cars across the valley, the idea of autonomous little electric cars, so it will be this kind of golf cart style internal traffic with a little train and so on, and no cars in the system. And then we get these kind of architectures which are curling along the topography line and terracing down or terracing up on the edge for all the residences. The big flat plateaus is for all the bigger office plates, and then in the valley is a lot of the social spaces, recreational spaces. So at the top, offices, residences coming down, of course, university space as well, and then and kind of recreational activation along the waterfront, like the waterfront is like that's a kind of a New York Central Park style kind of condition, and that's the kind of urbanism which embeds itself into the landscape, and is trying hard not to destroy the landscape, but work with the landscape, because that is a charm. You want the charm, and as well as the activation and programming of these areas. So this is what we're doing, and there's now kind of the next stage into building competitions which are spun off this. So this is a highly intensive camouflaging of residences until we reach up the larger office buildings, sometimes sunken, and then big canopies for covering these outdoor courtyards. So they are protected by the rain, but otherwise the air is breathing through. We also want to have passive systems and bring people make the outdoor comfortable and enjoyable in this kind of campus style condition. I just want to end. This is all the kind of Chinese work. You can see the new vision, the new China, all the way from high density Shenzhen to kind of garden city style extensions. I just want to end with London, and what we're doing at the ADOL at the moment is also a city within the city that is between the city of London, which is this fantastic cluster of banking towers, and Canary Wharf. There is a kind of harbor area, where we can have another district of high density development and have multiple projects there. So super high density clusters of towers. The exoskeleton allows for internal atria and intervisibility within and across towers with bridges. So this is kind of idea of getting a 3D urbanism going on a district scale, also in London. I suspect though that we're going to build something like this in China, probably in Shenzhen, where we at the moment have about kind of 15 projects rather than in London. So that's my lecture, the architecture for the new China. Thanks for the attention.